Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Riley Moss was on our sideline today, and after I think we're up like 22-0 or something like that, and he was like, Graves, they don't freaking score 1 point today. And I was like, yeah, dang right, Riley. And so, yeah, to shout him out is super fun, yeah.
I'm going to assume that's why Graves had 3 sacks, should have maybe had a 4th, had a fumble recovery. They got wiped out from a penalty. But what a day of, let's call it complimentary football. First half, you get the defensive turnovers. Second half, offensive touchdowns. It's a balance. We like to see it. Welcome to this post-Illinois State edition of Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell here to recap a 40-0 season opening win, a tale of two halves for sure, but what a beautiful story it was for Hawkeye fans on a picture-perfect Saturday at Kinnick, about 10 degrees cooler than it was last year against Utah State. A lot less plays for that defense out there, but a lot of fun certainly for the almost 70,000 in attendance. And you just heard from Aaron Graves there. It's always nice when the alumni are back and get quite a show. Torrey Taylor was there. Sean Green was an honorary captain. Right. Adrian Claiborne was in the house, probably a few others scattered around there. But
I didn't see Claiborne.
Claiborne was Hall of Fame class, so Adrian was back in town as well. So a lot of familiar faces, but a new offense and a new look. Similar execution, but results there for about 30 minutes. But your takeaway from that offense and the Tim Lester regime eventually showing what I think a lot of people were hoping for.
You don't want to overreact too much to something, but at halftime I was like, I think I'm going to overreact a little bit here. Really looked about as mediocre as you could hope for. Just a lot of 3-and-outs, just not much ball movement, drop passes and passes at people's feet. It was concerning for about 30 minutes, and then for the next 30 minutes it was, they did exactly what they were supposed to do against a team like Illinois State.
I definitely was on the overreact bus on both halves.
And everybody on Twitter, man. Holy cow.
But on the second rewatch, I almost think that the last drive of the first half is when it started to change.
Cade said that too, I think.
That I just threw up on the YouTube page right now. If you're watching, if you're listening on the pod, you can look. We got visuals and video that we're going to show during the podcast. 10 plays, 49 yards, only resulted in a field goal and a 2-minute drive. But there was one specific play, and I know a lot of people in the third quarter said that scramble to Ortworth down the side was when it kind of clicked. But I almost think, and I wasn't at the game, so I didn't get to ask. I don't know if Cade mentioned this at all. The first big hit on Cade, after that one, I'm wondering if he is like, okay, this is football, and he just kind of stopped overthinking things and then just played. Because after that, he was, only had a few incompletions.
When was that first?
It was one of the plays where he rolled out to the left, and then he just threw it away, and there's no one in the vicinity.
Yeah.
It was, I believe, late second quarter.
Okay. I do remember that incompletion, I think.
There was a play that people have pointed to, and listen, they had 3 big plays get wiped out by penalties. The Caden Weegan punt return, which I'm tired of shooting punt returns in that corner that don't count. That's 2 now, and that's too many. The Herkett sack, forced fumble that Graves recovered, and then a 20-yard scramble from Cade that ended up getting called back for an illegal motion. But people have pointed to that play, too, of that was first time Cade, got out of the pocket, ran, looked great. That felt like maybe the catalyst, too, of that's the one to literally and figuratively get your blood pumping. All right, it got erased, the play didn't count, but you're a little more into it there. But there were a couple moments there. I tried not to overreact because I did try to think of it in the context of you're going live with a new offense for the first time against a team that's not your defense. He's playing his first fully healthy game in 2 years. He's still trying to figure everything out there and get back into a full rhythm again against a team that he hasn't played before. And so, I think we even mentioned it in the photographer's room at halftime at Kinnick that they still had 147 yards of offense in this kind of up and down, lacking rhythm, lacking connectivity first half, which already put them ahead of kind of where they were in the opener last year. You're out of sync, but you're pushing 300 yards average, on pace for 300 yards in that game. And, you lose the fumble that could have been something. The big gain takes a little something away from you, off on a couple passes here and there. But, you go back to last year's opener against Utah State. They scored the 2 touchdowns right away, including one on the second play of the game. And then they didn't do a whole lot of anything the rest of the game. They had a fourth quarter touchdown from Kaleb Johnson. This one, kind of the flip. Okay, trying to get our rhythm, trying to get our balance in this new offense. And then second half, and Kaleb Johnson, I think, had a lot to do with that too. You click, Kamari's run 16 times into this front seven that's really aggressive. They're worn down. It's not Utah State hot, but it's a little warmer out there. And the attrition of Iowa's talent versus FCS talent, even though Illinois State, I think, is a pretty good football team, that starts tipping, and then all of a sudden, here's fresh Kaleb Johnson, who's 25 pounds bigger than Kamari. Let's start running that again. So a lot of different things finally syncing up and getting everybody on the same page, and things start hitting, and you get a massive second half that was just a lot of fun to shoot and a lot of fun to be a fan for.
Andy Murphy on What's Bugging Andy last night over on WHO in Des Moines, he talked about how he thinks FBS needs to kind of do away with these games against FCS teams, just that, like, what's the point? And, like, the only reason they do them is that, like, everybody else does them, I guess. And you almost, like, it's almost discouraged to schedule, like, a decent team week one. Like, you have to play one of these powder puff teams. No due respect to Illinois State. I don't give a crap.
Wow.
But I do feel like there is, even though I'm not one to normally react in any certain way after an FCS game, because it's like, you beat a team that you should have beat by 40. But boy, that second half has to give Hawkeye fans a lot of hope and just ideas like, boy, this team is capable of doing something. That offense just looked like they couldn't be stopped in the second half. FCS or not, that looked like a team that could win at least 10 football games this year.
Yeah, on the other hand, too, like I think, what we saw was what you wanted to see in week one against a lesser opponent. But, second half against an FCS level team, we're not going to score 40 points a game every week, So the expectations, can't wait to see what they do against Iowa State, FBS level, a team that has the talent that could be ranked. They're not going to be ranked week two, just because no one really lost in the top 25 outside of teams that played ranked teams. So let's see what they can do against, with talent level to you, is what I kind of want to see. But it was like, it checked the boxes of what you wanted to see week one. So, like, kudos to the offense for coming out there after struggling in that first and second quarter.
If you're lining up the two teams next to each other in terms of checking the boxes, boy, Iowa sure checked a lot more boxes than Iowa State did on Saturday. I mean, don't get me wrong, North Dakota's probably a better FCS team than Illinois State is, but that was an 18-point game. Like, that seemed like it was a lot closer than it should have been. They got banged up pretty bad. In terms of who looked more impressive week one, Iowa looked 10 times more impressive than Iowa State did.
I think just, the manner in which Iowa executed in the second half, the fact that it was, both on the ground, even before Kaleb went out there and ran for, a $119 or something like that.
Yeah, 119.
On 11 carries and 2 touchdowns. Kamari wasn't getting huge chunks, but he was getting chunks. And, Cade showed, could have had 2 rushes for 32 yards. Instead he has 1 for 12, but Cade didn't get sacked. That's a massive thing I feel like nobody's talking about. That was the tough part. I know Deacon Hill can move. He had a 25-yard touchdown run late in Utah Tech's loss on Saturday. He can move, but there's a difference between having mobility and being a statue in the pocket, even if you are mobile. And that was the tough part with Deacon, is sometimes it was just he was looking downfield and wasn't. We saw it with Miller Moss last night for USC. I mean, that's a guy who stays on his toes in the pocket. He's in the pocket, but he's moving around and keeping nimble. And that wasn't happening at the end of last year. Cade made sure, especially on that throw to Ortworth, that not going down, keeping play alive, and just keeping eyes downfield and executing. That was the thing that really stood out to me. And we'll get to Cade more in depth in a little bit, but that's 2021 Big Ten title winning guy that you wanted to come in. That was a huge part. But the running game, the offensive line, again, no sacks and opening up holes for 200 plus on the ground. That's a big job and a big statement against anybody, especially though to start the year in a new offense and just trying to get things clicking before a big game.
All us media guys had fun just because we had lots of highlights to shoot. We had big plays and we had touchdowns. It was great for us. But even in the post game, you could tell that the players seemed like they were having so much more fun. Like, Kaleb was yucking it up in there. Like, Luke was having a good time. Jay was so jovial in there. And I don't know if it's because we have kind of a new press setup where we talk to them more, not quite one-on-one, but like just kind of in a little scrum versus having them stand at the podium. I don't know if that loosens them up a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, I just never saw that out of them last year. And there was only really one, game where they dominated. That was the Western Michigan game. Other than that, it was just like, okay, the offense sucked again, so what do we have to talk about today? But
Sure.
yes, on Saturday, it seemed like those guys really were like having a good time. They were having fun and just really enjoying themselves in the postgame.
I'm sure they're just thrilled that what they've seen over fall camp, because we kept hearing like, yeah, there's potential, there's progress, and that things are going well. I think for them just to have, again, don't forget about the first half, but just look at it full 60-minute big picture. That was about as perfect of a start as you could ask for. Nobody got hurt. You're getting Caleb Brown back next week. You score 40. You put up almost 500 yards of offense. You have the number 50 scoring offense in the country right now, the number 40 total offense. That was about as perfect of a start as you could ask for. While your coach is at home serving a suspension, he's back now with the team as of midnight Sunday. But like, what more could you ask for? And they get to come off the field after, defense didn't have to play nearly as much. Time of possession for Iowa was pushing 35 minutes, something like that. Like, that's fantastic. I think it's probably 5-6 minutes better than last year's average.
I think last year was 28 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure those players come off the field and they haven't been holding their breath for a half or just like, trying to squeeze out a win. Like, not saying it was relaxing, but Brendan Sullivan got in and Max White almost broke another touchdown late. I mean, you got the twos in. We wondered if we'd see both quarterbacks, and you saw both quarterbacks in the perfect situation you'd ask for, because Iowa's up by so much and Cade's played so well that Brendan gets some live snaps as a Hawkeye for the first time. But you could not ask, I think, for a better overall debut. You worked off the rust and got into the new regime and the new offense in the first half, and then guns blazing in the second. You have so much momentum going into a rivalry game.
The only thing you could ask for, and I'm sure the players are gonna, or the team like watches film, I think, on Sunday, and they're gonna prep for Iowa State, is against better opponents, you can't let 2 drives get away from you. If in an ideal situation, and they 3 plays. The first drive was 3 plays, 3 and out. Second one, I think they had 4 plays or whatever. And then there's 2 3 and outs, and then a 4-play drive with a field goal after you recover a fumble in their territory. But like you said, after that, they got the rust off. It seemed like things were really clicking. I wanted to highlight Cade's comparison of the first half to the second half, because you look at the numbers in the first half: 74 yards, 47%. That's like well below what you want. Then he went 13 to 14. The only incompletion was a Jarrett Booty drop, and 177 yards. Iowa's not going to light up the yardage on offense, but that's still pretty good. Total of like 262 or whatever it was, 252, and 3 scores. Huge difference between half one and half two.
Yeah, and I think I thought maybe he'd throw 18, 20 times in the whole game. So the fact that he got 31 passes in there, I'm sure part of that is, just wanting to knock the rust off. And it's not going to be pretty. I know people got all up in arms about fall scrimmage stats 3 weeks ago, a little over 3 weeks ago. Like, this guy hasn't played live football in almost a year. Again, this is probably, I have to imagine this is as healthy as he's felt after a game and as happy about performance as he's felt after a game since probably the Big Ten title game in 21. I mean, Cade McNamara has been banged up, wasn't healthy all last year. Told us during the post game he didn't get through a full week of practice basically after the fall scrimmage last year. He had the quad, then he does the knee. He hasn't played a lot of football in the last 12 months, and it was imperative that he gets out there, maybe not look as sharp, but just get the feeling back again. And you're working with a new offense. We talked about the helmet comm system, so you have a whole new input and consumption progress and process of getting in-game information and talking about flushing the bad stuff. And yeah, I'd say he flushed a lot of shaky stuff in the first half and absolutely shined there in the second. But there's just so much stuff going on, and I'm sure there were jitters. Kid's seen a lot of football, played a lot of football, but I feel like he probably hears the outside a little more than he'll admit. I'm sure all those guys do. There's a lot of pressure of when you have an entire fan base and a lot of people, pundits around the country, saying, boy, if Iowa just had an offense, they'd be a CFP contender and be a playoff team. You take that to heart, and that's a lot of pressure for 22, 23. You got some 24-year-old kids on this team. And yeah, once it clicked, you saw why people can say that.
The duality of man and the duality of the fan was on full display. After 3 plays in the first quarter, you could already hear people booing Cade McNamara and Iowa's offense. And then at the end of the game, as he's running off, you heard people chanting Heisman, Heisman. You really ran the full gamut if you're Cade McNamara in that game.
It was really cool to see him beaming after that game. I was disappointed, though. I was waiting for Tim Lester to come down from the booth on the golf carts and get off, and I'm like, boy, this guy's going to get a hero's welcome as he goes through the tunnel. And like 3 dudes from the very top of the tunnel were the only ones that noticed Tim Lester walking in. But man, what a debut for him. I mean, this is exactly what you wanted when you hire a guy that has a little bit different looking offense and can get things going. And boy, yeah, it took a little bit to get things in sync, but sounded like the communication in the headset was great, the iPads to just see what went wrong or what was a little off right away. And boy, Cade McNamara, I think we've got that soundbite from him, or have we skipped over some sound bites?
Yeah, no, we got.
Let's start with a tale of two halves. We're still there. We want to hear from acting head coach Seth Wallace, 1-0, but it sounds like that win will count for Kirk Ferentz's record. I believe that was what Scott Docterman said, as well as Cade McNamara and Luke Lachey on just getting everything going, get everything clicking, and going 1-0 to start 2024.
I think a lot of the first half was, just the norms in the first game, and we've got some new guys out there in different positions, and I think just what you saw was an example of that. The second half, as it related to the game, just from a messaging standpoint, the big deal was, just clean up our execution, some things that shot us in the foot, there early on with some penalties and some things that ended up taking a little bit of momentum away from us. And anytime that you take the momentum away from you really start, draining, a little bit of the confidence as well.
I think we really started gaining some momentum at the end of that second quarter when we were able to go on a decent drive. We weren't able to, finish with a touchdown, but I think overall, when stuff wasn't going our way at the beginning, we were kind of, really our tempo wasn't very good. And I think once we were able to gain some momentum and gain some tempo, that really set us up really good for the second half.
Yeah, we're, absolutely. It all comes down to just coming out there and executing the game plan. There were times we killed ourselves a lot. I had the illegal motion in the first half and on a Cade's really good run, and I kind of killed the momentum there, and just trying to find different ways to help out. And we were killing ourselves a lot in the first half, and as long as we get on the same page, it's good.
It was to see Luke Lachey healthy again. Both of us picked him as offensive MVP. He, chastised himself for that illegal motion penalty there, but 6 catches for 60-plus yards. He looked like one of the better tight ends in the country, and that's exactly what you expected. And just great to see him healthy and Cade healthy and just that team healthy again to get out of this one 40-0 win. Everyone's healthy going into a rivalry game. That's just a lot of good vibes coming off the field at Kinnick.
Yeah. And Luke, you just wouldn't have expected that he would have been where on the offensive MVP chart would he stand on Saturday? Yeah. 4th, 5th, 6th? He looked good out there, had some nice pass catches, ran some guys over, absorbed some good contact, but there were just a lot of guys to talk about on offense on Saturday, which, again, is something that we're not used to on this podcast.
Yeah, we're happy to see it. Just seeing Jacob Gill show out. You saw his catch. I think he had 3 catches for 46 yards and that touchdown. And, certainly looked like a veteran presence, even though he didn't play a ton last year for Northwestern. Guy stepped in and probably had first or second most snaps of any wide receiver out there. And we'll get to the other freshman phenom, seemingly, here in a little bit. But we showed you Cade's numbers already, first half to second half. Let's hear from him more, just about a little more specifically settling in and really getting things clicking and being the guy Hawkeye fans thought he could be when in December of 2022 he said he was coming to Iowa City.
I think moments like these and I'm really picturing myself having moments like this is what got me through rehab. I think, having to rehab a second time was very difficult because I was, wondering what I didn't do the first time, and for me to, a lot of that motivation was being able to, what it was like, possibly to go out there as 100% again. Because I know last year I played and I wasn't 100% and I wasn't able to, move around the pocket as much. And for, a lot of visualization and mindset and really just relying on my teammates and those relationships was huge for me during that process. Yeah, I think I was cleared at either 7 or 8 months, but I really started kind of feeling like myself through camp because once I'm able to, you can rehab and you can have as much strength as you possibly can, but when you're out for that long, you have to gain like kind of your athleticism again. You have to feel, what becomes second nature for you. And for me, I was able to gain some of those movements in camp because as a quarterback, whether it's like kind of the smallest things, whether it's like rotating out of center or, like maybe pivoting off a pitch, like some of those little weird movements, you don't realize that how much that you actually do that in a game until I'm actually thrown in there.
And I'm sure, as anybody coming off any sort of injury knows, you're a little hesitant to go into those kind of awkward or seemingly awkward positions sometimes because, guy's been through it. He's got 2 knees, the quad. Like, I'm sure there's, as confident as he is, and he's expressed that confidence a few times that we talked to him in the last couple of months, you don't know. You don't know the next time you step if something happens. He took off and took 3 steps against Michigan State and goes down with another knee. I'm sure the mental side of his rehab and recovery, I'm sure, was as intense, if not more so, than the physical side. The human body does wonders, and it can come a long way if you do the right thing. But to get your mind right and get that confidence back, that's a heck of a journey. And I think you saw not just a happy, but kind of a relieved Cade McNamara on Saturday. Just be like, okay, yeah, I told myself I could do this, but yeah, we got it going.
And he's got to be so excited knowing, too, like, not to say that the weapons weren't there last season, but it just seems like there's so much more at his disposal this season, especially next week. You forget that we've got our far and away number 1 wide receiver wasn't even playing on Saturday, and so we're going to have him back, and just the weapons at this guy's disposal are a force to be reckoned with this season.
Well, you might have an argument there for number 1.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah, what a transition that we ran into. Reece Vander Zee, who comes from a family of ice cream makers, it sounds like. Thank you for using this shot. I told.
It was a great shot. I was looking through
I told some friends, I said, if you're watching on YouTube, it was a great kind of rack focus shift from Reece to Cade, and I was like, I love this shot, and I don't know if we have any use for it, but I'm going to save it anyways. 5 catches for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. This kid was in high school 3 months ago. It's been a while since he's played wide receiver, coming from a small school there in Central Lyon. But boy, talk about roaring to a heck of a start. Boy, that was a flimsy transition I tried to make. But boy, just you couldn't ask any more from an 18-year-old kid, a true freshman. Let's hear from RVZ, because he's got the nickname already. We coined the nickname when he came on the 2 deeps and then showed exactly why during that debut of why he was so highly thought of from Kirk and company.
You're going to have to give me 2 seconds to flip through video on this.
And Jay Higgins shared some perspective on it too, because again, Jay's been around a while, Cade's been around a while. They can share perspective of a freshman getting thrown in, but he had a heck of a story of just, again, Reece has not played a position that he excelled at in a little while.
It was a little bit surprising. I think he really started gaining a lot of momentum towards the end of camp. And, as you guys were able to see it, his ability to go up and get it and make plays was, something that he was gaining some traction through. And I'm just so stoked for him because, as a true freshman, you don't know how guys are going to react, in game situations. And, even for like me or Luke, this is our first time being back there, in a while too. And there's nerves and there's anxiousness, but I was just so proud of him, the way that he was able to perform. And something that's so impressive to me is just how unfazed he is by everything.
Yeah. Has this all set in for you yet? 2 touchdowns in your first ever college game?
Not really. No, I just had fun going out there and playing. I'm trying to move on to next week, and yeah.
I think he comes off humble. Those offensive guys are nice guys. You can tell which side of the ball Coach Parker recruits. So I'm assuming he's a good kid. He's a nice guy. I don't know. Luke was quiet when he first got here, so maybe he's like your Luke Lachey, like the Iowa Knights. I don't know. We'll see. But he's a good player. I'm sure somebody give him some ice cream for 2. What do you have, 2? Yeah, as a true freshman. Yeah. It's like it's usually old man's game. Like now you got year 5, year 6. You got guys who are he's 18? Guys, I was 18 a while ago, guys.
Yeah, we all were, Jay. We all were.
I don't know if he was – I couldn't tell if Jay was making a joke about the ice cream thing, like, oh, he's 18, can't go out and get drinks or anything, so he's just going to have some ice cream, or if that was a callback to his family business running ice cream. Because I asked Reece about that then later, like, how are you going to celebrate? And I don't think he quite understood the question. question I was trying to ask. But nevertheless.
Yeah, I think you just said yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Reece.
Carry on.
He's a true freshman. Give him some time to
He will turn
be comfortable up there with all the cameras pointed at, right?
His 19th birthday is 2 weeks from today,
Wow.
September 16th.
Who are they? Is that the Troy game?
That would
Right,
be
no, that'd be a Monday then, of course, yeah.
That'd be the week going into the Minnesota game.
Just an interesting progression of matters for Reece. I mean to go back and find the soundbite from last year if I can track it down from the Eye on the Hawks TV broadcast. I think it was Sean Bach, who writes for 24/7 Sports, who was in here, and I was asking him because he follows a lot of prep stuff. I was like, who are some recruits next year that Iowa fans are really going to like? And he's like, boy, this Reece Vander Zee kid out of Central Lyon, like Iowa State wanted him bad, and Iowa State's obviously had such a great pedigree of producing good wide receivers lately. Like that's a really good get that they could get a wide receiver out of Iowa State's mitts. And so I'm like, boy, good call ahead on Sean Bach's part. But also just, I mean, it's amazing how much this guy, like no Hawkeye fan would have known him 2 weeks ago. And then like he had that Kids Day catch that everybody kind of talked about, like, boy, he had a really nice catch there. Then he shows up on the two deep as a backup wide receiver. We're like, dang, true freshman might get some snaps there in week one. And then comes out there, you see his name mentioned when they're doing the starting lineups up on the scoreboard ahead of time. You hear Reece's name. I'm like, Reece is starting today? Like, this guy's just had such an incredible upward trajectory since he, as he said, just graduated from high school back in late May.
And he said he came into fall camp hurt too. So this is like
That's right.
This is like 2 weeks. He's gone from, oh yeah, that kid from Central Line. He's a little banged up, but hey, 6'4", he's got a little athleticism that we can work with. To now, he's one of the talks of the town, which is pretty wild for an 18-year-old. I mean, you heard Jay say it. It can be an old man's game sometimes as you get more experienced players, but if you can ball, get out there and make it happen. It was a lot of fun to see. And
a position too that they desperately need production from, and Gill and Reece Vander Zee look like they're filling that void. I think we all expect Kaleb to slot in next week and do the same. And who knows what Seth Anderson's kind of timeline is, but one thing from Gill and Reece, and I know it kind of plagued the wide receiver room last year, is no drops from those two.
Yeah.
That one touchdown from Jacob Gill, or from McNamara to Gill, like he was not open and he slid through two defenders and went and got the ball. Like these are plays, and the same thing with the touchdown from the second touchdown from Reece. Like went up and grabbed the ball, just made a play when maybe there wasn't one there. So it's something this team desperately needs. And I'm sure they're young. I'm sure there's some growing pains still yet to be had, but it was really encouraging to see that much production out of that room.
And I didn't realize this. I mean, it's an old story that hardly bears repeating anymore. When a guy who doesn't play a certain position in high school comes to Iowa and plays a different position, happens all the time. But Reece Vander Zee was recruited to Iowa, committed when he was still playing wide receiver for Central Lyon. But he told us in the press conference on Saturday that for his senior year there, they moved him over to quarterback, and so he was just playing QB back a year ago. So he hasn't even been a full time. I was looking at his high school stats. He did have a couple of touchdown catches last year, I assume on some flea flickers or something, but a kid who wasn't even playing wide receiver as of a year ago.
Didn't he say he grew up playing quarterback too? But he only early on was a receiver because Zach Lutmer was a starting quarterback there.
Yep.
That's a wild story that two players on the team.
We talk about tempering expectations with the offense. Things are going to change. They're not going to, in all likelihood, they're not going to score 40 a game. They're not going to put up 500 yards a game. But then Seth Wallace comes out talking about Reece and compares his playmaking ability to Desmond King and Cooper DeJean. Talk about the expectations just going sky high. You're almost like, Seth, don't do that. Don't do that, man. But hey, you saw it. Just put a ball up and see what a kid can do, and you can't ask for much more from a kid 2 weeks away from turning 19. He was about as impressive as possible.
Just that second one, I mean, it was like there were 3 Illinois State D-backs around him, and he just jumped in.
You've got the
tallest guy.
You've got a great low-angle shot. I mean, he just kind of like rises to the sky.
Yeah.
No clouds and just 2 hands all the way. It was a really great shot. Of course, we had to wait half an hour into the game to see Kaleb Johnson was suspended for the first half, but again, maybe it worked out the way it should. Kamari Moulton pounding away at that front 7, and then Kaleb steps in, and you see him there in the pregame, and boy, he announces his presence with authority right away.
Did we ever find out what he was suspended for?
I've heard a rumor, and I trust it. It sounds like it wasn't anything major. Just missed an event of some kind.
Yeah.
Him and Jazz Patterson in the same, which we didn't see Jazz out there at all. So
yeah, that's true.
we'll see. But hey,
maybe that's a follow-up this week. Just see if like maybe the Jazz was suspended a full game or something.
Yeah,
we didn't know
sure
about how this isn't right.
But yeah, we can listen to Kaleb. Again, just a heck of a debut. Only had basically a full game stats in 30 minutes, less than 30 minutes, because Max White ended up going out there with the twos to end. But hey, we've talked about Kaleb Johnson might be the number one top, pure running back, if you want to call it that, on this roster, and certainly showed it. Had to wait a little while, but again, probably as jovial as we've seen KJ at any point. Even after winning the West against Illinois, he was feeling great after beating the Redbirds on Saturday.
Man, that felt good. That felt good. It felt real good, man. So I'm just so glad to be back on the team, be back with the team, helping us win. So it was just like us fixing the mistakes and fixing what we did wrong in the first half and making it 10 times better, even if we mess up, going 110%. So that's what we did today, and I feel like second half, we did a completely great job. So now, like I said, we go back and we look at what we did wrong and, keep moving forward.
Be the top
it feels great. Hey, Jay over there, he talking, so, he over talking, so it feels great just to know, like, we put 40 points on the board and it wasn't just them. So I'm just so happy to be part of this team and, just be happy to be back.
Yeah, just so much joy. Mm-hmm. Again, I feel like there wasn't, like, the stress exhale at the end of this game, which is, all right, we won. Hey, like, good vibes. It's a win, but boy, that took a lot. I think that's probably as much fun as they've had in a win, maybe since Rutgers was 22-0 or whatever it was. You got to feel great about that. And you talk about the offense being a little out of sync as they got going again. New offense, first game, all that. They didn't have Caleb Brown out there, and they didn't have Kaleb Johnson out there, who you can make a good argument are two of your top 3 or 4 offensive guys. That's probably going to throw rhythm off a little bit too. Reece had a heck of a game, but also you've got an 18-year-old out there running routes with the ones. Like, that's, hopefully the routes are good, and it sounds like they were, but there's just new pieces, unfamiliarity, all that factors in. Now you get to go into week 2 fully healthy. I'm guessing Caleb Brown's going to be a starter. Wouldn't be shocked if KJ rises and maybe gets more reps in the first half. Well, he'll certainly get more reps in the first half, you'd hope.
Yeah.
Because he won't be suspended.
One thing about this offense that I was kind of keeping tabs on Saturday is it's something that Tim Lester said in the offseason. It's like hard to judge, kind of what you need to improve when compared to last year because you were ranked at the bottom of all the offensive categories. But one thing that I thought stood out was like make the makeables.
Yeah.
And I notched like 6 that they missed in the first half. Either a bad throw by Cade, Luke on the motion going forward before it snapped, which took back like a 30-yard gain or 25-yard gain, but only one in the second half, and it was that Jarrett Bowie drop in the, when the game was already out of hand. So like making those makeables for this offense, especially against the, again, the better competition, is something they have to do. And again, that checked that box on Saturday.
I don't want to bring it all back to me saying I told you so, but I remember.
Feels like that's where we're going.
No, it's 100% where we're going. Because last week I remember talking about this, how it seems so off to me that, like, Kirk would kind of point out, like, yeah, Kamari's starting because, LaShawn, he's still kind of a little dinged up from his injury. We want to make sure we save him, blah, blah, blah. But literally no mention of Kaleb Johnson or Jazz Patterson. And I'm like, this feels weird. I think I even said it on here that I'm like, I feel like there's something else going on there. And sure enough, it was that he, missed a swarm event, and so he had to miss.
What's going on in Iowa City?
Why would the Jazz do that?
He had to miss a first half of a game. And so going forward, I would say I would be 100% certain that had that not happened, he would have been the starter on Saturday, and he's going to be moving forward after what we saw. And LaShawn, we saw a few plays out of him out there. He got a small handful of carries. And, hopefully once he's back and fully healthy again, he'll be a solid number 2. God bless Kamari Moulton for, kind of plugging those holes in the first half. Still looks like he's still young, he's still a little undersized, and he's going to work his way into that depth chart eventually, but Kaleb and LaShawn are going to be 2 legit dudes.
LaShawn had 5 carries for 9 yards, and I think, that it was, I took it, I gauged it was just, they wanted to keep him healthy from the nagging injury he had in camp.
Speaking of the depth chart, the new one just came out in the last couple minutes. Tyler Tashman just shared it. Kamari Moulton is still the number 1 running back, or Kaleb Johnson.
Oh, the dreaded or.
Has dropped to RB3, it looks like. Reece Vander Zee is listed as a number 1 wideout over Jarrett Bowie. Caden Weegan listed as wide receiver 1 on the other side. Caleb Brown back on the 2 deeps at number 2.
Really?
And then the third wide receiver is Jacob Gill with Terrell Washington Jr. behind him. We saw Washington get in and had a carry late with the 2s. Other than that, it looks like more or less the same offense you got out there. The tight end spot is Lachey and Ostrenga. Your offensive line is the same. Defensively, it doesn't look like there's anything that has changed on that side. So there's your starting offense. It looks like going into Iowa State: Vander Zee, Lachey, Weegan, Gill, McNamara, Moltner, Johnson.
One thing when you bring up Caden Weegan, I was sitting there in the first half, like,
no one wants Caden Weegan to have.
I know.
And I have Williams.
Who was the most explosive player in the first half for Iowa with the ball? It was Caden Weegan.
Fast.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, why don't you give him the ball, like on offense? And the offense picked up, so let's,
I'll forgive it this time.
Yeah, I'll forgive it. But he's just so explosive, and he took that punt return, and he had another punt return that's pretty good, the punt return that came back. Man, I just think he could be a real good player. And if it's just instead of, sending a tight end in motion, throw him out to the flat, do it to him, and see what he can do in space.
Again, I don't think we've seen the whole playbook. For the most part, nothing was too crazy. And again, if it's not for a block in the back, Caden Weegan has the most explosive play of the entire game. I knew he was fast. That kid friggin' flew down that sideline. I mean, it almost felt like the Michigan State punt return from Cooper, where just the minute he caught it and took a step, you're like, oh yeah, I mean, there was just never a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the punter was there at like the 10 to maybe get him and got blocked at the last second, like nobody was going to catch him.
The weird thing,
he looked explosive.
The weird thing about when a kid like Reece Vander Zee breaks out is that nobody knew. Illinois State had no idea who Reece Vander Zee was probably before week 1. They didn't know what to expect out of him, and so he's going to be drawing a lot more attention now, which I'm sure will allow for more opportunities for Weegan going forward. It's probably not going to be Reece getting the majority of targets going forward, but I'm still surprised to see Caleb Brown not listed number 1 on that depth chart.
I think when you're in the doghouse, you have to.
Again, does the depth chart really matter? Does it really matter?
At wide receiver, probably not.
Worry about who's on the field and who's making plays there whenever their number gets called. And
I think it matters when the coaching staff's trying to make a point, like last week when we, this is us speculating on what they were doing. When you look and Kaleb Johnson doesn't get mentioned, he's running back 3, and it's like, hey, you screwed up, don't do it again. You're still going to get your opportunity. You'll be suspended, but it does send a message, at least, because having that starting role is still something I think every player hopes that they are, and that's a goal of theirs. So I think it does matter, but doesn't actually matter. You know what I mean?
That is kind of like the perfect way to say it. It's what's not there is a lot more important than what is there, I would say. Obviously, starters are locked in, but don't, especially in those skill positions where there's going to be rotations and movement. Like Caleb Brown's the number 1 wide receiver. Like if you take everything from last year and just
I agree.
Experience, like he's your 1, but boy, if your 2 is Reece and your 3 is Gill, or switch them around however you want, like you've got 3 dudes now. Caden's. I mean, you have 4 wide receivers, at least 4, that you feel, I would think, pretty darn good about getting the ball in their hands, or them being able to make plays, whether it's in the return game or however it may be. And Seth Anderson, again, if he's healthy, we know that he can make a play or 2 there. So, again, through 1 week, 60 minutes, when things weren't absolutely perfect to start and you had some injuries and guys missing, man, you got to feel good about stuff. You want to temper expectations, but, boy, you saw a lot of good. I think the vibe coming out of this game is a lot better than the win last year against Utah State, and maybe that's because it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Mm-hmm. Again, you scored 2 touchdowns right away, second play of the game you score, you're feeling great, and then things like, all right, well, I guess we kind of survived Utah State if you want to frame it like that, but yeah, I mean, you see how happy those guys are. I keep going back to that. Like, they have to just feel great about this. The defense was only out there for like 60 plays. Offense was out there for 70 and built some really good momentum. You got to watch out for what's coming from Ames, but man, you feel like you laid a good foundation across the board in a lot of ways.
We got about 40 minutes too, and we haven't even talked about the defense, which it's like almost nonchalant, just shutout, 3 turnovers in the first half.
I mean, they looked fantastic. It's exactly what you expected. Jamari Harris gets a pick right away. Sebastian Castro does a Sebastian Castro thing and rips a ball out, and TJ Hall recovers. The defense was what they thought they were, to quote a famous former Hawkeye, the late Dennis Green.
I was almost on my rewatch watching it, and I'm like, what am I even looking for? Like, I know what I saw.
I know what I saw.
They were pretty dominant.
And Illinois State lost their starting running back there in the first half, too.
Yeah,
so
that's a bummer.
I hope Illinois State can overcome that for their sakes and still have a solid season. But, yeah, I mean, you could not ask for anything more. And probably, let's be honest, did you expect anything less from Iowa's defense there?
Not really, you know.
I feel like a shutout was kind of the expectation for them in that game.
I guess the one thing I was encouraged to see was the D-line. The starting D-line has a lot of push, and I guess even Brian Allen, too. Aaron Graves gets 3 sacks. He had 2.5 last year. That stat's, I'm sure you've seen that stat before, but, man, he looked good, and I think he credited Y.A. Black just taking a double team on. I think that's going to be a similar thing we're going to see all season long.
Ethan Herkett looked really good. Again, had the sack wiped out, but he was in there a couple. Jay Higgins led the team with 7 tackles after 16 in that opener last year, 16 or 17 or whatever it was. It just felt like
2 pass defended, too, if I believe.
Yeah.
Correct, or at least 1.
Nick Jackson had one, I know, which
that was a good
reminded
one.
me that he has a higher jump rating in college football 25 than Jay. And I had asked him about that a couple months ago, and we had a laugh about it. But
my brother and I were talking about this, and I don't know if this happens in your game. It puts Nick Jackson at like a speed edge rush, like a defensive end on my game, and I'm like trying to put him at linebacker, and I'm like, he's good in coverage.
I
want him out there.
With Iowa. That's a good
observation. It drives me crazy because every time I get in like a nickel, he's like he's a down lineman, and I'm like, I want him right there, and they have another linebacker in, so it's kind of annoying.
The defense just spread out. Again, I think they were on the field for, I'll look it up as we'll go to a soundbite from Jamari and Aaron about their defensive performance. That defense was out there for so many fewer plays than last year against Utah State. And, yeah, I think they felt a little fresher and looked like you'd want them to. So we'll hear from Jamari and Aaron now about the defensive shutout performance to open the season.
As defenders, I feel as though we got to, no matter the situation, we got to go out there and play defense. It's a mindset more than anything. But it's nice when the offense is scoring, even when they're not. We're going to do what we have to do to win the football game at the end of the day. But I know it feels great. It feels great. I can't stop smiling. But, we're going to go back in tomorrow and watch the tape because we still have a lot of mistakes out there that need correcting and, try to keep it rolling.
I think it's very relieving. We put in the work since last January, and then to see it come to fruition today is, I would say it's very, what's the word? Humbling, yeah.
Rewarding?
Rewarding, yeah.
So also, Utah State ran 72 plays last year against Iowa compared to, I think, the 61 that Illinois State had this year. Time of possession, Iowa had like 32 and change last year. What do we say? They had 34 and change this year. And those are little things that make a big difference, though. I mean, you talk about 10 fewer plays for your defense, less time on the field.
Muted. 34-48, so nearly 35 minutes.
I mean, that's a big difference. That's a big difference, especially getting ready for Iowa State to come to town, who has
another important stat: 7 of 15 on third downs. I think that's a lot. But I haven't looked at the stats from last year, but I already know that's better than last year. And a lot of those on the didn't convert side were in the first few drives.
Only one. I'll have to check the exact yardage, but only one real explosive play, and that was that long one that Nestor got picked on one-on-one there. But other than that, Illinois State just didn't do a whole heck of a lot.
4 for 5 in the red zone, which is something the team did not do well last year. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, you really just can't ask for anything more, I suppose, when you're not just installing a new offense, but you're without your head coach. And Seth Wallace, it talked like his role didn't really change a whole lot until you got into Thursday night going to the Friday. Kirk was gone from midnight Friday through midnight Saturday going into Sunday.
Do you think that, I know it was a major storyline going in just because it's the first time since 1978 Hayden Fry or Kirk Ferentz wasn't on the sideline for Iowa, but was there I don't think there was a moment or a call that you're like, oh, we're missing Kirk Ferentz here. And of course some of that's because you're playing an FCS level team, but I guess the one thing, the fourth down call, I agreed with that, so I didn't think it was a bad call. But did you guys feel like at any point you're like, this is not a Kirk Ferentz run ship?
No, I mean, the offense, it sounds like, is kind of Lester's show, and what a show it was there in the second half. We talked about it last week of just when would you notice he was gone? And listen, his fingerprints were still all over this team, and it was strange to see Seth being the guy out on the field, like talking to the officials. Not that he doesn't do that already, but him kind of being the lead dog there. I mean, I'm sure the game day situation, the pregame speeches and the postgame speeches, the halftime talks were a little different because it's not Kirk doing it, but it's still same philosophy and same message, maybe a little more aggressive since it's Seth, and I've heard some of his pregame talks to linebackers. But I don't think the overall changed a whole lot just because of the 25, 26 years of this is what the program is, this is how we handle things. So I don't think he was there because he's been there for so long, if that makes sense, of just nothing really changed. And I think they probably, again, it's the opener. You're not going to do a whole lot of crazy stuff. So I think for the most part that was, if you put Kirk in there and he's on the sideline, I don't know if things look any different at all. Again, the fourth down call was the only hashtag new Kirk thing from a few years ago, but it was probably, and that's an analytics call, that's probably the right move. I
was sitting there wondering if he'd actually make that same play call, because they could have pinned him back deep and maybe got a safety out of it if you get a good punt. But
we haven't even talked about Reece Dakin. Had a shaky first punt, but other than that, he was.
As Elliot Clough said to me on Saturday, boy, Iowa fans now have two Reeses that they can actually root for.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When I say Reece?
Yeah.
Yeah, Reece Vander Zee and Reece.
I get what he's saying.
A different Reece that Hawkeye fans don't like very much.
She's an excellent player, and we'll just leave it at that.
Okay. I didn't get it, actually.
Took me a second first, but okay. Yeah. Carry on.
All right, well, want to hear from Seth? Let's hear from Seth. Let's get out of this conversation and go to Seth.
It's really set in yet. There was enough, when you turn the page from, what your primary responsibility is to, what you certainly weren't, expecting, that you don't really give a whole lot of thought to that. I did grow up a coach's kid, so I watched my father do it for a long time. So, there were thoughts, but as soon as the thought, comes along, you're sitting there at 8 o'clock, the team leaves at 8:15, you still don't have your tie tied. Little stuff like that just, it'll completely distract you from probably the cool that's, that you should be thinking about when it comes to, parents and, your father. But, I've spoken with him and, I think, the rest of the evening, the rest of the afternoon will be spent with him and the rest of my family. And I'll get a chance to reflect on it then.
So Chad Leistigo asked him about being a coach's kid. Seth's dad. So Seth was born in Kentucky, but has lived the majority of his life in Iowa and considers himself an Iowan. So Chad had asked, as an Iowan, as the son of a head coach, Seth's dad coached at Grinnell College, just what did it mean to have a moment as a head coach at the University of Iowa, a program that means so much to you? And you heard a little bit of emotion in voice, and just, there's the company lines of, hey, this wasn't a big deal, and just, kind of stepping in, my role didn't change a whole lot. But you can hear in his voice there, just as a kid who grew up in the game, whose dad is a head coach, and a guy who's spent a lot of time in this program and got that got the associate head coach moniker last year. This did mean a lot to Seth Wallace, and he got the water bath in the locker room after we saw those videos of it. I think it's just 1 week, but that's a moment that no matter where he goes and ends up being a head coach wherever, that's a cool moment, and that's again cliche. It's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah, good moment for the guy who went to Grinnell High School, played just down the road from Iowa.
He dug up some awesome co-college Seth Wallace highlights.
Yeah, if you look at his headshot from his time at Co, I think he's got both ears pierced, little hoops in both ears.
He's got a little boy band swagger to him.
Wide receivers swag,
That's true.
I do think that, unless another school comes and picks him up, that he'll be the next Iowa football coach.
Is that right?
That's what I think. I think you watch him and nothing really changed. I think there's an opportunity when a head coach is suspended that if the program isn't the way Iowa's is, that there could be more of a letdown. But I just think that it's kind of solidified it for me personally, and who knows when that is, unless if Kirk stays another 5 years, maybe he goes somewhere else in the next few years.
If I were a betting man, I mean, this is just purely speculation, but that's what we do on podcasts, so we're okay with it. I think that, I asked this last week, if we think Seth is here next year. I don't think he's going to be here next year. I think that he's going to get another probably Big Ten job, maybe. I don't know who's all on the hot seat in the Big Ten, but like a Purdue type of job, something like that. If Brett Bielema, if he's not at Illinois a lot longer, I could see him maybe going over to Illinois or something. But he's going to have his shot as a head coach before too long. There's always been a lot of talk about LeVar Woods, if he'd be the next Iowa head coach, and I think a lot of people like him for that job. And so in terms of how long Kirk is going to be around, that time frame seems to work out a little bit better for LeVar because he's willing to stay, whereas Seth could potentially pursue something else if he chose to after this.
That's fair. Yeah, and all this is speculation, That's what we do.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to throw it. It's not what I'll do. I have no idea what's going to go on.
Well, the best part about speculating, Mitch, you could say something and no one's going to remember it.
The reason I don't want to speculate is because we're about to get into our picks recap.
Oh, yeah.
0 for 2 the first night. So, hey, folks around America know Cam Miller's name, don't they? Talk about don't play FCS schools. North Dakota State, as they are wont to do.
NDSU was barely an FCS school. Like they hardly even count as an FCS school.
I think we outmaneuvered ourselves. Everyone knew North Dakota State was, a good team, but we're like, you know what? I'm not going to fall for this. I think Colorado is talented.
Listen,
I just was surprised that their defense didn't. Their defense is awful. Colorado's. Their offense is great. They're going to score a lot of points, but their defense is going to stop anyone.
Yeah. So here's a recap again. If you're watching on YouTube of our picks. So what did I go? 2 and 3.
You went 2 and 3. I went 2 and 3, and Owen went 3 and 2.
1 and 6 to start last year, something like that. So hey, this isn't terrible. Minnesota again.
Only Big Ten loser over the weekend.
Dragan, you're defending Big Ten Kicker of the Year, misses 2 field goals, and a little bit UNC. I was impressed with USC as well. That was a fun one.
I watched that one, or I watched the second half of that one. I'm not so sure those two teams aren't middle of the pack in their conferences, but Brosmer looked better in the second half.
Yeah,
but still,
again,
it's week one.
Kid was playing at New Hampshire last year, and you're going up against an ACC defense, and it's your first home game, and there's jitters, and yeah, it took a little while to get fully in sync. You don't have Darius Taylor back there, but Marcus Major, Minnesota rolls out anybody. They moved a former defensive back to running back last year, and it worked out really well. So they ran the ball well, but yeah, just a little bit for Brosmer to get a little more in sync. So we'll see what Minnesota becomes. Wisconsin was going up against Western Michigan.
Didn't get to watch that. It was on Friday night when we were shooting high school football, but looked like a kind of a slow start for them.
Yeah, and then Penn State looked tough.
Looked pretty darn good. Yeah, they looked like they could contend for a Big Ten title with Ohio State.
Ohio State did not cover against Akron, I believe.
They did not. They won 52-7, I believe, or 6.
What was the spread?
49.5. It closed at 49. It was 50 with, when we were doing these picks.
Man, against a MAC school, that's a pretty big spread. For
yeah.
FCS, that'd be one thing. Good grief, that's huge.
I believe they didn't score in the fourth quarter.
Akron's
going off the rails a bit for the Zips.
It's walking into Columbus is tough. Iowa does it in a month, so hopefully they keep it within that.
And look at all this faith that we had in Iowa against Illinois State. All three green down the board.
All right, so is that Owen leading so far at 3 and 2 with the picks?
And I even told Mike on Thursday, I was like, I wish I'd picked North Dakota State in that game. I got some bad feels about that one.
I mean, that final Hail Mary was 4 yards short completed. I mean, that's Cam. I would say Cam Miller made some money, but there's NIL, so he's already probably making some money. Boy, he looked great.
Yeah, a Solon grad. If we didn't clarify why we like Cam Miller around here, but he
that looked like a guy who has more than 8,000 total offensive yards in his career and 80-plus touchdowns. It's going to be him and South Dakota State's quarterback who won the Peyton last year, the FCS version of the Heisman. Boy, I don't know when the Jackrabbits and Bison play, but holy cow, is that going to be fun. Yeah.
That's going to be one you want to put on your maybe third screen on a Saturday if you're watching college football.
That's a second screen game, Mike. That's a second screen game. When is that?
I've got power conference bias, you know that.
Clearly, yeah. North Dakota State, South Dakota State.
Two teams that have the talent of, like, I don't know, they could be middle of the road Big 12 teams. Frankly, like they've got the talent.
That's coming up October 19th in Fargo. So that'll be in the Dome.
A lot of Iowans in that game.
Yeah. And your boy from Dubuque, was it senior?
Oh, yeah.
Dubuque senior had the
Kubitz.
Yeah,
Kubitz.
Oh yeah, he texted us when he made that play.
Yeah, had the pick that went off of his teammate's leg. Kubitz may be earning a spot at the next level. He could be a low round draft.
It was a fun first weekend of football. Happy to have it back, and we had a great Eastern Iowa OT. It sounded like.
Yeah, clean show across the board. I mean, we had a really nice little output on Friday night with Mitch in the field, with Curtis in the field over at Cedar Falls. Yeah, it was about as clean of a show as you could want out of week one, and so that's watchable product on Friday nights with Eastern Iowa OT.
Champagne problems at Liberty High School. I text Owen at halftime. I go, so how long do you want this package, this game recap story? I go, I have 9 touchdowns. I'm already not using the first 4. Boy, Liberty, congrats to Coach Chandler, former Hawkeye, getting his first win. And that was a win. They've only played 3 times, Liberty and West, for the Principal's Bell, but they lost by 1 score last year, and you could just tell on the sideline that was a Liberty squad that wanted to beat West. And they've got Coach Woods' kid. Mason had 2 touchdowns and had some really nice catches. Jason Manson's former Hawkeye quarterback, his son's there, Juju, and had a really nice touchdown catch as well. So that team has talent. Jack Wallace, a 4-year starter, which you do not hear about anywhere at quarterback. Yeah. He made plays, but boy, Liberty. They were impressive.
Yeah, you got to see the only not future Hawkeye, but only Hawkeye in this year's senior class that we get a chance to watch on Eastern Iowa.
Sure, yeah.
With Mason Woods.
Mason was impressive. So, yeah, I believe. Do we have the full Eastern Iowa OT on YouTube? Is that the thing we're doing? So yeah, if you want to catch up on all those week 1 highlights and everything, that's there. Thanks to everybody who tuned in to the Fry Fest conversation, the Remembering Hayden Fry panel. That is now up as a podcast as well. It's on YouTube if you want to go check that out on the channel. Dan McCarney, man. Put him up on a stage for 3 or 4 hours and just let that dude tell stories.
I almost wanted him to be the only one to talk because he was telling some doozies. And then Phil Hattie told a story about how he used to get amped up for, he called it Cloney Week.
Cloney Week.
And maybe that's a little, taking that, when he went to Iowa State, he won 5 straight against Iowa, so it kind of like makes you think like, oh, he loves these rivalry games, especially Iowa State.
It's so leading off that, and a big thanks to Coach Don Patterson, Jim Malini, Hep Peterson, and Jared DeVries. They were on the panel as well. Boy, that was just amazing. Everybody had a great story. Coach got a lot of shine because he had some really good ones, but that was just a fantastic panel. So thanks to everybody who was consuming that. And again, if you want to watch it or download it as a podcast, those are available. I talked to Coach McCarney afterwards as well. We've got a Cyhawk special coming up on air this week, since the Cyhawk game is on CBS 2:30 on Saturday. There we go, boy. Oh, chills. The royalties are something we can't pay for.
Play it for 2 seconds.
But it was really insightful of McCarney's journey growing up in Iowa City. Told me he almost went to Iowa State, a really interesting recruiting story. And then just kind of this is a very emotional rivalry for him. And you can tell it's a very emotional rivalry, to the point where his last game coached Iowa State was 2006. He has not been to a Cyhawk game since, and says he will not go to another one. So that conversation is coming up in the special, which airs
Friday night on Fox, and at 1:30 on CBS before the game. So you tune in for your coverage for the Cyhawk game. At 1:30, you got to watch our special, and then pregame for half an hour, and the game will kick off at 2:30.
That's going to be a fun project. These are and then we're going to have a post-game show on CBS as well. If you watched what we did for women's basketball run in the Final Four and national title game, we kind of did some live post-game and things like that. We're going to try and do that as much as we can. But Curtis is going to be out there, and Owen's going to be there as well, doing some live reports from Kinnick after the game, and we're just kind of, I think, one of those whatever we can do in the post game. We're going to. I'll be back here. Mike will be back here too, kind of setting the table and everything. But this is exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the fun stuff of covering live sports and trying to stretch our boundaries, stretch our wings a little bit, and do some fun things that maybe you don't always get to see with post-game coverage. And that's the opportunity we get because CBS is airing Iowa and Iowa State, and that's going to be a fun one.
Got to have something to submit to regional Emmys next summer, so this is as good a time as any.
And nominations come out this weekend, so we're keeping a close eye on that as well. Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll be back here Wednesday. really getting into Cy-Hawk week. We'll talk to the players and Coach Ferentz tomorrow, and that stuff will be posted as well once we get that. But hey, it's rivalry week, and you've got two sides coming off wins. I think arguably Iowa feels maybe a little bit better than Iowa State, even though both sides showed something.
Iowa State's looking more like an Iowa program, 23-3. I haven't watched the game yet. I was going to watch it either tonight or tomorrow, just kind of see what happened.
Sure.
I was watching the Miami-Florida game and a different game too, but, I'll be interested to see if it was a comfortable. I know they were winning 14-3 for a while, so that's a 2-score game, and then they scored it in the second half late, I believe. So, we'll see.
Yeah, last week maybe doesn't even matter. It's Iowa State. It's cliche, but it seems to be true. Throw out the record books and just let the Hawkeyes and Cyclones go at it for 60 minutes. Or as we've seen in recent years, might need some little extra football for free as well. So again, if you're not following Eye on the Hawks, this is your first time joining us. Eye on the Hawks on Twitter, Iowa's News Now on YouTube and Instagram. Thanks to everybody who's continued to support the YouTube channel and get those views up. It's been really fun to build this brand and really watch it start to take off, fly, so to speak, as the Hawks continue to do as well. We'll be back here Wednesday at 1 o'clock to preview the Cy-Hawk game here on